From your side of the window, it looks like almost nothing. A finch lands on the feeder, a sparrow swells into a soft little ball for 2 seconds, then smooths back down as if nothing happened. Cute. Maybe cold. Maybe sleepy. Maybe finally comfortable with your garden. But inside the bird, that tiny feather fluff is not random softness. It can be a temperature adjustment, a risk calculation, a reset after stress, a maintenance decision, and a clue about how safe your space feels. In other words, what looks simple from outside may be revealing what is happening inside the bird's body and attention at that exact moment. Most people read this behavior in one of 2 ways. Either the bird is relaxed or the bird is sick. And honestly, both guesses make sense because feather fluff can point toward comfort and it can also point toward trouble. The missing piece is context. Once you understand that, this stops being just a charming backyard detail. It becomes one of the most useful bits of bird body language you can watch for. By the end of this, you'll know what brief fluffing usually means, what kind of puffed posture deserves a closer look, and how a few simple changes can make your garden, balcony, or feeder feel calmer and safer for birds. Start with the body itself. A bird's warmth does not come from feathers alone. It comes from the air trapped between them. When a bird lifts its feathers, it creates a thicker insulating layer around the body. That little puff-up on a cold rail or windy fence is often just heat management. Small muscles at the base of the feathers let the bird adjust that outer layer constantly, almost like changing the thickness of a jacket without going anywhere. So if you see birds fluff more on cold mornings, after a wet spell, or on an exposed perch, don't assume they are weak or strange. They may simply be doing exactly what a healthy wild bird should do. The backyard translation is practical. Food matters, but shelter matters too. A feeder out in the open can still feel harsh if there is nowhere nearby to get out of wind or pause between visits. A shrub, small tree, vine-covered trellis, or protected perch can help birds regulate themselves better as long as it is not so tight or low that a predator can hide there unseen. But temperature is only the first layer. The more interesting layer is attention. In the wild, attention is a survival resource. Every second a bird spends warming itself, preening, or settling its feathers is a second not spent watching for a hawk, a cat, a sudden human movement, or a more dominant bird. Behavioral ecologists often describe this as a trade-off between vigilance and other needs. A bird cannot give full attention to everything at once. So when a bird lands, fluffs a little, and begins maintenance, it is telling you something important. Immediate danger, at least for a moment, has dropped enough for the bird to spend attention on its own body. That does not mean the bird has stopped being wild. It does not mean it trusts a person the way a pet does. It means the bird's arousal has lowered by a degree. Its nervous system is no longer in pure emergency mode. That is a big difference. A sleek, narrow, spring-loaded bird is ready to launch. A slightly fluffed bird that preens, wipes its beak, or tucks one foot is revealing a different state altogether. Not total safety, but relative safety. And that may be the most powerful reframe in this whole behavior. A bird fluffing near your feeder is not just being adorable. It is showing that your space can sometimes be used for more than emergency feeding. For a few seconds, this wild animal can afford to warm itself, reset itself, or care for its plumage there. In a world built around risk, that is meaningful. Now, here's where people often get confused. Not all feather fluff is the same. A quick full-body puff and shake can happen after landing, after a minor fright, after a chase, or after bathing. That kind of fluff is often a reset. Feathers get displaced during movement, and the bird is putting them back in order. A slower, settled fluff that leads into preening or quiet resting usually tells a different story. That one is more about maintenance and comfort. Then there is the third kind, a bird that stays puffed for a long time, hardly moving, looking withdrawn. That is the version that changes the meaning entirely. So watch the sequence, not the snapshot. What happened right before the fluff? What happened right after? A chickadee that puffs, shakes, grabs a seed, and leaves has given you one kind of message. A dove that settles, puffs, half closes its eyes in winter sun, then resumes scanning, has given you another. A bird that remains fluffed for a long stretch in mild weather, barely reacting to normal surroundings, is sending a message you should not ignore. This is also why feather fluff tells you something about attention, not just comfort. A bird can look relaxed and still be highly aware. Birds do not switch vigilance on and off like a light. They adjust it. You can often see that in the head, even when the body is fluffed. If the bird's feathers are loose, but the head keeps turning sharply, the bird is warming or resettling while still closely monitoring the environment. If the whole body suddenly goes sleek and still, something just crossed its danger threshold. Maybe a shadow, maybe movement behind the glass, maybe a cat under the hedge, maybe another bird rushing in. That is useful for backyard watchers because it keeps you from overreacting to the wrong thing. If birds are visiting but never lingering, your food may not be the problem. The space may feel unpredictable. People often feel disappointed when birds snatch a seed and fly off at once. It can feel like the birds are nervous, ungrateful, or never really settling in. But from the bird's perspective, that fast in and out pattern usually means the feeder is usable, yet the larger setting is not fully comfortable. The question is not only, will they eat here? The deeper question is, can they pause here? Memory matters too. Birds learn landscapes through consequences. They remember where food has been reliable, where escape routes are good, where reflections confused them, where a hawk swept through, where a person appeared suddenly, where a cat sat under cover, where another bird keeps driving them off. A feeder becomes part of that mental map. So when a bird repeatedly chooses one perch to fluff and settle on before feeding, that is often not random preference. It may be the point in your garden that best balances view, shelter, and escape. That means consistency helps more than many people realize. If you want birds to relax enough to show natural comfort behaviors, make your space predictable. Refill feeders at roughly similar times. Move slowly near active birds. If you're on a balcony or using a window feeder, avoid looming straight at them whenever possible. Even indoor movement can read as danger when it is sudden and close to glass. Birds are not judging your intentions. They are reading patterns. Social pressure is another layer people miss. Sometimes the bird is not worried about you at all. It is worried about other birds. One dominant pigeon, starling, jay, grackle, or even one bold house sparrow can keep smaller birds in a constant state of interruption. If one species appears loose, fluffed, and comfortable, while others only dart in for a second, you may be looking at hierarchy, not personality. The quieter birds are not less appreciative. They are being crowded out of calm. That is where feeder design really matters. One packed tray can turn every visit into a rush. Multiple feeding spots usually work better than one crowded one, especially if they are spaced apart and set at slightly different heights or sight lines. A nearby waiting perch also helps. Birds often want a place to land, assess, and decide before committing to the feeder itself. If all you offer is a single exposed platform with competition and no pause point, you may see a lot of tense, sleek, fast behavior and very little of the relaxed feather fluff that tells you birds can breathe a little there. Season changes the meaning again. In winter, fluffing often means insulation and energy saving. In rain, birds may loosen and shake feathers to move water and restore the structure of the plumage. After a bath, dramatic fluffing is normal. The bird is reordering everything. During molt, when birds replace old feathers with new ones, they can look oddly puffy, patchy, or messy because the coat itself is being rebuilt. In hot weather, though, pay attention to the whole posture. A bird dealing with heat may hold its body differently, open its bill, seek shade, or hold its wings slightly away from the body. That is not cozy fluff. That is temperature stress in another direction. So, what can you actually do with all this? First, create what I think of as a safe pause zone. Birds need food, but they also need a place to stop and check the world without feeling trapped. Put feeders or water near cover, not buried in it. Give birds a short dash to safety, but keep enough openness that they can see danger coming. And if birds use your space, keep pet cats indoors. No amount of good seed can make a garden feel safe if threat lives at ground level. Second, reduce sudden disturbance. If birds flush every time a door opens, every time you step onto the balcony, or every time a silhouette crosses the window, that matters. Slow movement matters. Predictable movement matters. Even the angle of approach matters. Walking straight toward feeding birds is far more alarming than moving sideways or pausing before you come close. Third, keep food and water clean and dry. This is easy to overlook because feather fluff can look so gentle and cozy, but a bird sitting puffed near wet, spoiled seed, or a dirty bird bath is not giving you a sign of trust. It may be coping with stress, cold, or illness in a poor environment. Empty damp seed. Clean feeders regularly. Refresh water often. On balconies, clear away droppings and old husks so the feeding area stays usable and hygienic. Fourth, make windows safer. This one matters more than many backyard bird lovers expect because birds often perch, fluff, and preen near glass. A feeder that seems peaceful can still be next to a dangerous reflection. Use exterior markers, screens, or other visible patterns on the outside of the glass so birds can read it as a barrier. And think about distance. A feeder mounted very close to the window, within about 3 feet, or much farther away, beyond about 30 feet, is generally safer than the middle distance where birds can build up speed and still aim for reflected sky. Fifth, watch patterns, not isolated moments. The most useful question is never just, did the bird puff up? It is, when did it do it? Where? For how long? After what? And followed by what? Once you start watching that way, your garden becomes easier to read. You stop collapsing everything into hunger. You stop taking nervous behavior personally. And you start seeing how weather, cover, memory, competition, and human routine shape what looks like one tiny, ordinary motion. Now for the calm but important distinction. Most feather fluff is normal, brief fluffing in cold weather, after bathing, during preening, while resting, or while settling onto a perch is part of everyday bird life. You usually do not need to worry. What deserves closer attention is persistent puffing, especially if the bird is inactive, low on the legs, breathing hard, closing its eyes often, drooping its wings, showing poor balance, or allowing people to get unusually close without reacting. A sick or exhausted bird may stay puffed because conserving heat and energy has become more important than everything else. That does not mean every fluffed bird is in trouble. Birds need recovery moments after storms, after intense cold, and after close escapes. But if the posture looks withdrawn rather than simply restful, context changes the interpretation. If several birds at the same feeder seem lethargic, clean the feeder and bird bath promptly. Throw out any wet or moldy food, and follow local bird health guidance about whether feeding should be paused temporarily. If the issue began after repeated window strikes, address the glass. If a bird appears injured after a collision, contact a licensed local wildlife rehabilitator. The point is not panic. The point is better reading. And that brings us back to why this behavior feels so moving once you understand it. Feather fluff looks soft, but it is not simple. It is one of those quiet moments where the inner life of a wild bird becomes briefly visible from the outside. Heat regulation, risk assessment, social pressure, memory, recovery, maintenance, a shift in attention. All of that can be hidden inside a 2-second puff on a branch. So the next time a bird rounds itself into that familiar little cloud of feathers, don't just think cute, and don't jump straight to worry. Ask a better question. Is this warmth? A reset? A sign that the bird can lower its guard here for a moment? Or a pattern telling me something in this space needs attention? If you've noticed this in your own garden or on your balcony, I'd love to hear what was happening around the bird when you saw it. Cold morning, post-bath shake, crowded feeder, favorite perch, repeated window area, a bird that only relaxes in one corner of the yard. Those details are often where the real story lives. And if you like this deeper way of reading ordinary bird behavior, subscribe. Because the smallest moments in a backyard are often the ones telling us the most.